These are my junk journal wreaths. They're rag wreaths, and I call them junk journal wreaths because everything that I use to make junk journals I have put into these. There's muslin and lace and buttons and thread and trim and jewelry and little junk journals and all kinds of bows. And there's a tassel, I call it a tail, a long tail. And there's lace appliques, and lots of stuff has been tea-dyed. And I've sewed little things on. And there's all kinds of neat little features. This one has a locket at the top. Lots of little buttons, appliques. There's a traveler's notebook. The first thing I'm going to do is take my muslin, and this is more than a yard, but I'm going to make more than one of these rag wreaths, so I will just get it started and show you how I make these strips. And of course I'm making a video, so a little black cloud comes along and hides the sun. I'm going to just make little snippets in the end of the muslin. And I love the sound. Wendy taught me how to make this sound. Isn't that fabulous? And I know you guys are going to ask me how wide I'm cutting my strips. I would say between 1.5 and 2 inches, which is between, call it between 4 and 5 centimeters. And what I'm going to do is rip lots of extra strips, because when I finish doing this, I'm going to iron them. And I only want to have to iron once. So once I have a pile of these, I will then go through and pull off the loosest strings, and I'll put them in a pile to iron. So with my muslin all torn into strips, and like I said, this is far more than a yard, but I'm doing a number of them. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to open up a skein, or as my daughter Izzy likes to call it, a loaf of sari. And it comes twisted like this. There is a video under tutorials on my YouTube if you haven't seen how I store and use my sari. But when you open it up, there's a spot where it's tied there, and I'm just going to snip that. And I have some twine. I'm just going to cut off about, I don't know, I cut off between 12 and 18 inches. And I tie it loosely here so that if I make a mess of this big hoop, if it gets tangled or snarled or I need to shake it out, I can always have kind of a handle here to pick it up. And then I also store it by hanging it from this when I use, usually I don't use a whole skein at a time. My newest purchase, I stole one from Cog's workshop, and then he bought me a 12-pack, so I would leave his alone. I just bought these little S-hooks, and then you can literally hook this on anything, and I have 5 to 10 open skeins that I'm working of different colors on a string, and you can hook this on. a knob or the edge of a cabinet or a shelf or whatever has a little lip to hold it. So I find that quite helpful. Anyways, so to start this, I usually just go to the bottom and find one of the seams. They're long pieces that are stitched together, and I'm just gonna take that seam and cut off the part where it was sewed together and toss that. And then I'm going to take one of these pieces, it doesn't matter what, and start unwinding it till I get to the next seam. And I'm going to snip that. So here is my first long strip in between the seams, and I am just going to continue to go along this. Well, I lost the end I just had, which is another great reason you want it on that string. There we go. I'm just going to continue to unwind it and snip it at the seams into strips so that I can iron it. When I iron the strips of muslin here, I'm going to use a separate pile for my sari silk. So in the end, we have strips of the muslin, strips of the sari, and then I usually pick one other color of the sari silk and just put little highlights of it, forget the bow for a minute, here and there, just to add some flavor. And you can, you know, pick out the color that matches the room it's going in or the person that you're going to give it to, or what have you. And I also used a little of this this brown or tan. Now, I am sure that if you didn't want to use sari silk or you don't have access to it, that you could take any light weave of cotton and cut or tear it into strips and do the same thing. But I'm just showing you my method of using the sari and the muslin to do this. So I'm going to continue cutting strips, and I found creating this is, and this is on an 8-inch frame like the one I just showed you. I used probably 2/3 of a skein of the vanilla colored sari silk, and yeah, it was less than one, so that'll kind of give you an idea on the quantity. It also depends upon how full you want to make this. I wanted to get just as many pieces on there as I could. Now that I have my strips cut in muslin and this blush lavender, it's more purpley than pink. It was the closest to lavender I could find, and I think with the lavender buttons, it will certainly look quite lavender. And I have vanilla sari strips. So now that I've got that all prepared, I'm going to take an 8-inch wire frame, and I have several strips that are 3 feet long in total, or just over 90 centimeters. And what I'm going to do is snip this piece of sari silk right there, and I'm going to tear it in half. Almost all sari will tear nicely. Oh, I love that sound. Once in a while I get a piece, it just won't, the way that particular weave went together, it will not tear, but I would say 19 out of 20 times it'll go into a perfect strip like this. And at the bottom of what I'm going to call the bottom of this wreath, I am just going to make a loop and pull it through and give it a tail. And I have now marked the bottom of that. And I'm going to do this with both vanilla and the lavender in this case for this wreath. And later on then I'll go back and I will also add some lace and some other things that I want to have dangled from what I call the tail. but I do this to mark the tail in the beginning. And then I'm going to take another piece of this almost lavender sari, and I'm just going to snip that little knot off the end. And I'm going to turn this over, and I'm going to just sew a hoop, a loop, a thing to hang it from. So I'm just going to tie this in a knot. And I want it to hang just above the wreath there. So I will, yep, that'll be just about right. On this side, I'm going to tie another knot. So now I've got the top marked and I've got the bottom marked, just for my own perspective, so that I can keep reorienting it, because while a lot of this is just going to be beginning to take the pieces and tie knots, I want to be able to hold it up and see what colors are falling where, and if I have something I want to alter or such. And then eventually I'm going to be putting other things into the wreath, and I want to be able to hold it up and look at it from the perspective it's going to hang. I found an old crocheted lace table runner, and of course I did my Mrs. Cog thing, and I dunked it right into Lipton iced tea and dried it on the clothesline. And I did that because I have a hard time finding doilies. I know that is strange. Some of you seem to have really great access to estate sales and older stashes of these wonderful things, these lace tablecloths and such, and I find them very hard to find in my parts. I just do not frequent places where I find them. So this was a wonderful find, and I'm just going to go right around here and snip above each of these knots. There we go. And what I have here is a doily, and I am going to literally sew this right into the beginning, right into the middle here, before I tie any more knots on. And it doesn't have to be a lace doily or a symmetrical round pattern. For instance, here's a piece of gorgeous lace trim that my friend April, Pink Oddbird, sent me, and I could sew this here, and all of the parts around it are going to be covered with the strips. So something like that would work nice in it, or even something spectacular. This came out of my amazing package from CJ Mangione, and Sheila Gingrich sent me some beautiful silk stuff. This could be sewed in there just as easy as a backdrop that will show in the center after your wreath is finished. I guess it's a little busy to see in back of it, but you're looking for something that will fill the void in the middle. So I am just going to go ahead and use this tea dye doily and stitch it to the edges right there. So here is the 8-inch frame with the doily sewed in. It's not supposed to look pretty around the edges. We're going to cover it anyways. I just have it stretched, and it doesn't need to be perfectly symmetrical. Nothing needs to be perfect. Like junk journals, the flaws or the things that are off center or indicate that it's handmade, it only adds to the charm and quaintness of the whole creation. So now that I have my center on and I've got my tail marked at the bottom and something to hang it on at the top, I've actually just taken a clothespin and clipped it on the edge of something, and then whenever I'm finished working on it for a bit, I can just hang it right on there and take it back off again. And I am going to spend the next number of hours multitasking, but with my hands I will be tying these around, and I'm going to tie them on all 4 levels. Now the ones around the center, I will probably do them last. Actually, it's probably easy to feed sari silk and the muslin through. I'm just going to go right through the edge of where I sewed that to tie the knot there. Like so. And most of the rest of the next step is just tying knots. Just be mindful to leave a little real estate room on the bottom here and maybe a little bit above it so that you can make the tail fuller. We're going to attach more things at the bottom. And I'll be back after I've got some good amount of this filled in. So I've worked my way around. There's my top, and here's my bottom. Let's see if I can pull you out just a little more. My messy counter there. So what I've done going around is I've tied just a few of them through the actual lace here, just to give it a little extra security. It's probably not necessary at all. And it's gone quicker than I thought it would. It only took me about an hour and a half, 2 hours to fill in, I would say, 2/3 to 3/4 of the wreath. So it's going quite quickly compared to the time I had budgeted. And I'll just put a little bit of the lavender sari here and there, and even a few little pieces of lace. I've just tied 2 or 3 in a spot here, and over here. When we finish this, we can take the middle pieces that are covering the inside and kind of wiggle them and tuck them back in, just to show a little more of the lace in the middle. So I'm just going to keep going right around here, and when I get to the bottom, I'm going to stop because I want to tie a larger piece of lace as a bow on here, and I also want to attach a whole lot of more what I'm calling the tails here. So I will just keep whittling away. So I've got about 80% of the wreath tied on, and show you the back side. Here's that tie that we put on the front to hang it from, and there's always ends that have gone to the back side. I just wait until I've got them mostly sewed on and just poke them right back through. You can see about the density of the knots that I've made. A few are bigger knots with the muslin pieces, and many of the ones with the sari are smaller, but it's gone fairly quick. And I have left space at the bottom. So if I pull this up, I know where the center is, and I can hold it at the center and kind of, in my mind's eye, center these at the bottom. And I'm going to flip that back over. And now I want to add some other colors of sari silk drapes to the tail. So I have a tattered piece of this blushy lavender. I don't know if this is going to tear well. Let's give it a try, because it's raggedy in spots. Oh, that worked. Yay. Give us a nice fringe too. And to me, it doesn't matter, so I'm constantly pulling these threads away. It doesn't matter so much if it's the same length as the initial two. I don't mind that they're different lengths. You can always go back afterwards and trim them up so that all of the tail at the bottom are the same approximate length. I'm just going to make this tail a little thicker here. And I think I will take some of this lace that I tied in spots around here and make a tail, make a piece for the tail. Okay, so twice that long. And I try not to do too many duplicates. I want it to have that junk journal feel where you kind of go spontaneous. What I say in some of my tutorials and courses is it's very deliberate, but I want it to look random and happenstance. So I'm going to use a different lace, I think, on the other side. This is a tea-dyed lace. And I'll just loop that through here. And then what I'd like to do, I left some space above the tail here. I am going to take a thicker lace, which I also tea-dyed, and I want to tie a bow with it. And I want the bow to have maybe half the length of the tail. I want the tail of the bow to be about half the length of the long tail, so that it's kind of layered and cascaded. And I stink at guesstimating. I think, maybe I'll just take this big long piece. This is about, in total, the same length as the tail itself. But I'm going to use up a lot of real estate tying it in a bow. I'm just going to tie it right around that. And let's see if I can get the flower part right side up. that's kind of fiffy. I like that. Oh, and the ends almost drape the way I want them to, lengthwise. I could never be one of those people at the craft stores that make the wreaths and the floral arrangements to hang up on the walls, just because I couldn't. I'm bow impaired, bow and ruffle impaired. No matter how many lessons I get, I don't seem to be able to do it easily. So yeah, that works. Okay. And I am probably going to find maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 more strands to put on. I've left a little room and there on the back. And you can always, if you ever want to tie something else on while you're working on it, you can always scunch these together and get a little more, find a little more of the wire to do so. So the next thing I'm going to do is the buttons. I've actually had a hard time, brace yourself, finding the buttons that I want recently. I've been looking for these cream ivory antique shirt button looking things. This is 2 orders of 650 buttons. They come in packages of approximately 650 from Amazon, and I will plot the affiliate link below the video. I think they're $6 or $7. So I ordered 1 pack of 650, and I liked them, so Cog ordered me several more. And then I also got purple, which had quite a few really pretty lavender colors in it. So I'm going to mix the buttons that I sew onto the edges of some of these dangles, some of the ties, the extensions, and I'm going to mix cream and lavender, and I probably will pick out and not use the larger buttons as I go. But I want to, like my junk journals, make it look randomly distributed, but I don't do random well. I'm also going to go along, and anywhere I see strings that are obviously hanging off, I'm going to clip them. It's frayed, and that's fine. I'm fine with that shabby. I want it to be frayed, but there are occasionally longer threads or floofies they're distracting. And then the other thing is, occasionally you find one of your strips that didn't tie quite as uniformly, and it's just sticking out a little bit more than the others. And if you just trim it ever so slightly, at least for me, that helps make it all be a little more uniform. So buttons, sew buttons. Whenever I'm on the phone with my children and I say sew, they automatically answer buttons. And I'm just going to try to find a place on these little, the ends, what are we going to call them, on the little ties that we've put on, where the buttons will show. If you want to ensure that they're not going to flop over and hide themselves, you can always cheat just a bit and fold over the tie, just maybe not even exactly, but a little bit that way, and kind of tack it down a little. I don't think you need to do that for the smaller buttons, but maybe for the bigger buttons. And it just gives it such a pretty effect. So, by the way, the link for the lavender buttons is the same link as for the, I think they called them seashell colored. I would not call them seashell colored. I would call them cream or ivory, but that's what they're called. And it's the same link, and you can, oops, you can pick them out in different colors. So buttons. So there's the first button, and I'm just going to go around periodically and stitch cream and lavender buttons throughout. I've got about half the wreath full of buttons here. They're subtle. I don't know if they pop right out to you, but they are. I've sewed the cream ones onto the blush or lavender sari, and the lavender onto the cream. Before I continue around sewing the buttons on the top and the other side, I want to add a loud ribbon as a bow here. I don't want to add it at the top because that would end up covering our lace in the middle even more than it already is. But I want to put this on before I sew the buttons, so I can at least sew the buttons where they'll show around this. So I just took this is really much more lavender than it's showing on the on my camera's my phone's camera. My phone intensifies colors exponentially. This is not as bright of a purple as it appears. I'm just going to go down here at about, oh, I don't know, I would call this 10 o'clock. And I'm just going to tie a bow. And I'm just going to tie a small bow here. Just gives it a little extra pizzazz. And I'll probably put a charm or a dangle or several of them, and I'll want to have that kind of framing it in the background. And I probably will trim the ends of these like so. But I'll wait until the end or till I'm closer to that part. I just wanted this on here so I can continue sewing around and kind of position the buttons so they'll pop a bit and not be covered underneath this. Moving right along, I've got some buttons sewed around, hopefully where they will show. They're subtle. They kind of flop where they're going to go. Next thing I want to do is secure this bow. It's going to want to turn down and flop. Gravity is pulling at it. So if I take its tails and kind of lift up its skirts there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some muslin strips because they're the bulkiest and most secure, and I'm going to kind of crowd that the bow that I've tied there to give it a little more support and get it snug. And if it continues to flop down, I may actually put a stitch in it just to keep it kind of pointed up and where it wants to be proud and shine straight out. Yeah, I can fit one more in there. Okay. Well, it's wiggling a lot less. Like I said, I may just put a stitch in there and attach it to something right in back of it. Oh, we have a little more room above that as well. Put a few more strips in. See if I can see that without bumping the camera again. What you can't see is I have a big arm that's holding the camera over my workspace, and on that arm I have draped probably 50 or 60 long strips of muslin that's been ironed and not cut yet. And then I've got 2 strings of unwound sari silk. It's very crowded. And it weighs it down a bit. There we go. So the next thing I want to do is create some button dangles like I would for maybe the spine of a junk journal, a little dangle. So to do that, I'm going to go and get out my buttons and grab some jump rings. I really like the effect of a string of buttons. So what I'm going to do is I've picked out some lavender buttons because I'm trying to have some little lavender touches that will make this pop as the other color besides earth tones and creams. And I'm going to take a jump ring and open it right up. And I'm going to call this my anchor button, only because it's a little bigger, a little louder, and that will be the button that I anchor my string. And for purposes of how long I made this tail, I'm probably going to work with a string of maybe 25 buttons. So I open the next jump ring. And I'm just going to put that on the opposite side of this button. And then I'm going to put another button on it. This is only difficult because my anchor button is a little bit big. I don't think it's too big. I think I can get that closed. There we are. And I'm going to take the next jump ring and just go to the opposite side of that small button and put it through there, and take another small button and then close that up. And so on. I'll stay with you here and do a few more. It would probably be easiest if I opened several jump rings just to grab. I'm taking the largest out of the 3 sizes here. So I'm going to go to the opposite side of this button. And I'm going to choose another one. Close that up. And then I'm going to take the next jump ring. And so on until I have a whole chain of lavender buttons. And there we have it. So I'm going to continue on until this is 25 buttons or so long. I've attached my lavender button chain to the side of my tail, and I've added to that a few more sari ribbons and another piece of lace, and I put this to the side where it wouldn't get caught too much behind the tails of the big lace bow. So now at this point I've added muslin, sari, buttons, bows, I've used thread, we've used lace, and what's missing is books or pages. So the easiest way, I think, to make a junk journal to fit on our wreath is to take a charm that's already a book, and here there's a number of them that you can get at Hobby Lobby, Treasure Island, and they've got all the pages inside. Or of course you can make a micro journal similar to the Harry Potter or little ones that I made at Christmas. Those, of course, are full-fledged junk journals, similar to this little Harry Potter one that I had made. That has something on each page, but you could easily take a wire or a clip or anything and run it through and attach it right in between the ties to the wire frame. In this case, what I've done is I took a secret garden book, and it has just little flecks of what looks like a lavender or purple design in it, and it's already got the hook there, the ring rather, through it. So it's the basis to put a book on the wreath. And then in order to make it a little junk journal, I've taken some lavender embroidery thread and braided it for a tie and wrapped it around twice. And I've taken some dusty dark lavender ribbon and just put a little tab at the top, wrapped it around, and I've attached this hummingbird. And what I'm going to do is attach this here in the middle of the bow, and I'm going to put a string of cream colored buttons in back of it so that I've essentially made a charm, a junk journal-y charm, and I'll attach that right on there. And then the only thing left to do is I'm going to take a few little pieces of lace applique and stitch them on various places around, and I will also probably put a few more buttons on. And that is my junk journal wreath. So I'll attach all this and be back to show you the end product. So this is the end product. A lot of those buttons are flopping upside down, and I had to go back through and fish them out and kind of set them right side out. I added a little teddy bear there, sewed on a few lace appliques, and even put a little applique there on one of the longer strings of the tail. So I like the way it came out. There is no end to the different ways that you could put this together, or the different colors, and I had so much fun making them. I've got 3 or 4 more in the works. I appreciate you joining me, and I really would love to see what you put together if you decide to tackle one of these. Thought it was a really fun project. So thanks for stopping by. All the links are below the video, and I will see you guys soon. Take care.